The Trouble in Paradise podcast is intended for mature audiences. This means you will hear realistic adult language such as and go off. Audience discretion is advised.
What is knob polishing?
You're gonna make me say this. I am a neglected man.
I like to think that I look like a Jack, even though my name's really Bob.
Does he have danglers or something?
Well, it's time to go do them lighthouse duties.
Sitting in the cheese at the old Walmart to cool off.
That should be the headline. Man tasered in the nuts after stealing beef.
Yeah, but you're not gonna sit in the cheese. You're not gonna sit in the cheese, and you're not gonna put ribeyes down your pants either.
House cleaning is secondary. So what is the Viagra triangle?
Possibly we aid in your digestion.
I don't know if his little hand is smaller than his little ears or what.
Aw, well maybe he has a syndrome.
Want to go check out my RV? It's parked right around the corner. Because I'm pretty sure that I saw some moose knuckle.
No.
There is absolutely some moose knuckle going on.
My swampy friend. What the hell is a swampy friend?
I know. So they're not going to get any scraping on their shaft.
Yes, I'm going to do a downward dog.
Okay, pretty lady. You had on those gosh darn sexy leather looking shorts.
Ladies and gentlemen, and assholes, gather around. It's time for another action-packed episode of
Trouble in Paradise.
Hi, I'm Nigel Kent.
And I'm Jazmine Starr.
And welcome to Trouble in Paradise.
Our show is a free-thinking, open-minded podcast discussing conspiracy theories, the paranormal, true crimes against humanity, plus our favorite only in Florida stories. The content presented by Trouble in Paradise contains speculation and conjecture and is not intended as educational material or advice. It is therefore not misinformation and does adhere to YouTube's community guidelines.
Yes,
Correction there.
And there's a reason why we have to give you that disclaimer now on Trouble in Paradise.
Yes, there is.
Because our last episode was deleted by the overlords at YouTube. We did an episode where we speculated that there may have been some alien technology used in the quote-unquote, air quotes, vaccines. And that was enough to piss YouTube off and cause them to delete our video. We appealed it, saying that it was conjecture and speculation and that we weren't giving medical advice. And they said, F you very much. Your video is going into the dustbin of history. So that is how the fate of episode 51 of Trouble in Paradise was decided. For those that would still like to consume that episode, there are other ways to get it. Jazmine Starr, why don't you tell everybody how they can get into our podcast and our program?
To reach us, you can reach us on our YouTube channel, Trouble in Paradise. Hit that like and subscribe button and join us in our live chat. Instagram, Trouble239. Twitter at Tipcast239. Email, trouble@trouble239.com. Patreon, Trouble239. Audio available on all major podcasters. And hopefully we will re-release maybe 51.5 with just no explanation, no captions or anything.
Tags to alert
no
the censors.
tags. So we can just have a little surprise episode re-release out there for anyone who may enjoy watching it again.
For sure. And this is the Trouble in Paradise podcast. I've just started the recording for the audio version, which Jazmine just told you where to find it. Any podcatcher that you prefer, you can find it there. We are talking tonight about the massacre at Waco, Texas that occurred in the spring of 1993. This was actually the deadliest standoff in the history of our country involving civilians. And this occurred... It was a sort of religious cult called the Branch Davidians, which faced off against members of the ATF, the FBI, and other agencies that aren't officially acknowledged by the federal government. and it resulted in a deadly fire that burned dozens of people alive, including 20 children. So it's a pretty serious subject, and we don't feel like it's been covered in all of its facets. So that's what we're here to do today on this episode. But first, I thought it might be fun to lighten the mood just a hair. And I've got an old word game that we used to play called Pick Your Poison, and I prepared some Pick Your Poison choices for you.
No, just for me?
Just for you, Jasmine Star, out of the blue, to warm everybody up. Everybody come on, jump on the live chat. Let's have fun with this tonight.
Okay.
These are all A and B questions. You can pick one or the other, okay? Jasmine Star, you know how Pick Your Poison works.
Yes.
Pick your poison. Which would you eliminate forever? South Florida's frequent 100% relative humidity or cane toads?
Cane toads.
You'd get rid of the cane toads and keep the humidity?
Absolutely.
Because cane toads kill doggies, don't they?
Yeah. And yeah.
So that one was easy.
Yeah.
It's going to get harder.
Okay.
Also, there's a South Florida twist on these Pick Your Poison questions.
All right.
Which would you eliminate forever? South Florida mosquitoes or the Biden presidency?
The Biden presidency.
Wow. So you actually... The mosquitoes have been murder the last couple of weeks. They've been terrible. My ankles look like I got chicken pox on my ankles from all the mosquitoes.
Have you looked at the recent VAERS report?
The recent VAERS report? Uh-oh. Do I got that Rona?
No,
Oh, no,
that
that's
would
from
be
the
that'd be the
vaccine.
adverse. Yep. Moving on from that, but
Yeah, well, we don't want to get banned again.
I know.
I'm not vaccinated, so
Right.
I can't be having vaccine. Although, have you heard of this thing called
Flying
vaccine?
vaccinators.
Flying vaccinate. Oh, yeah. That's episode 50.
The Skeeter's gonna skeet. Yeah.
Skeeter's going to skeet episode. Was that 50 or 51?
Yeah, that was 50.
That was 50.
Yeah.
Okay. So go back for flying vaccinators. They're going to use mosquitoes to vaccinate everybody.
Yeah.
But
But you know that like locally they're giving away like these fish that you can go to Department of Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife, I believe, or in mosquito control, and get like these, if you have standing water, get these like little 2-3 inch fish, throw them in your standing water.
And they eat all the mosquitoes?
And yeah. And I like that idea.
What's going to prevent
I
a
like
cat
that.
or a bear from taking the fish?
Well, you know what? I don't have the answer for that, but I like that a whole hell of a lot better than genetically modified mosquitoes being let loose in Alamorada.
I know, but you don't have the mind of a sadistic psychopath like Bill Gates.
Well,
So you'd rather get rid of dear, sweet little President Biden, who, as you pointed out earlier,
he had a little trouble today.
he had a little bit of trouble. We're going to play this video real quick of President Biden really, really screwing up a speech at the G7 summit. Let's jump over to the screen cap so you guys can check this out. Oh, my goodness, is this embarrassing.
We could work together with Russia. For example, in Libya, we should be opening up the passes to be able to go through and provide food assistance and economic assistance.
Oh, Twitter strikes again.
What?
Twitter strikes again. Oh, my goodness. Did they know that we were recording them? Anyway, so the point is that Mr. President, he called Syria Libya not once,
not twice,
but 3 times in his speech
he had
before
some
the G7.
difficulties.
So I'll tell you what. Anytime you try to run anything that's anti-establishment, Twitter just knocks you down right away. It's like they know.
But I mean, here we are, right in the middle of a live stream, and you go to stream that, and then it's like, boom.
Yep. Right.
No
away.
can do.
It's still stuck up there on the spot that it got frozen on.
Right. Is our live stream still?
Yeah, our live stream's still rolling.
All right.
Yep. So, let's move on to the next Pick Your Poison, shall
All
we?
right.
That's
Sounds
good, clean, harmless fun. They can't get after us for doing that, can they? So, Jasmine Star, would you rather once and for all, get rid of all the dangerous New Yorkie drivers in Naples, or never have to go to the DMV again?
Never have to go to the DMV again.
Really? You want to keep all the dangerous New Yorkie drivers in Naples?
Sure.
You don't like going to the DMV that much?
No.
Well, okay. That one was
Well,
easy.
I mean, I figure if I don't have to go to the DMV, then I don't have to pay for something, and I'd rather just deal with the New Yorkie drivers than have to pay for something.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's my irrational
Pay with
thinking.
frustration. I get really frustrated by the New Yorkie drivers at on the roads around here. But
You know what? That's why I only drive a couple miles from my house.
how about this one? Would you rather never see on the news again instantaneous seasonal wildfires in the estates, or BLM? She just did a straight Napoleon Dynamite sigh. That's a tough one too, isn't it?
I feel like this is a setup.
You're about to find out. All about Jazmine Star. Which one is it? Seasonal wildfires or BLM?
This is a crock. This is a setup here.
It's a loaded question. I know. You got to pick one though. Which would you rather never see on the news again? Seasonal wildfires in the estates or BLM? You can do it. You can do it.
I plead the fifth.
All right. I know which I would pick. I would pick seasonal wildfires because they destroy property and kill people, just like BLM, except it's close. It's close to home. Okay. Last one. Ready for the last one? This is the bonus one. If you get this one right, then you get to run the rest of the podcast without me. Would you rather see...
There is no right answer, and pick your poison. That's not how this game is played. Go ahead.
Would you rather see on the news tomorrow morning the full truth of 9/11 finally coming out, or a final cure to the red tide?
The full truth of 9/11.
She's like, screw
No
those
brainer.
fish.
No brainer.
Those fish can pound it. Yeah, I would like to know. But that would destroy, if the truth about 9/11 came out, that would just destroy an entire genre of conspiracy theory.
The Matrix. It would. It's all part of the. I mean, let's get into the deprogramming of the
masses.
Yeah, of society.
So before we go deep dive, because we are going to go deep,
We're getting ready.
ladies and gentlemen, Jazmine Star has been studying the Waco Massacre all week and has some really, really excellent angles on it and has opened my eyes. Because this is one of those theories that I believed the official narrative for years and years. In fact, only recently did I come to believe that there may have been any problems with the official narrative.
Well, I think that was when we first started talking about it, and we had to look at our age whenever the actual event took place. Mm-hmm. That was something that we had to take into account, because when you look at that, we were impressionable and still non-question,
not critical thinkers.
Right.
I mean, we were in high school.
Right. We were not at that place of questioning authority or thinking that there could ever be a narrative. We were trusting of media.
And the media did such a great job of making the Branch Davidians look like idiots, like country hilljack screwballs.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you believed everything that, and not just this situation, but really everything that we were being fed throughout, our entire childhood and high school years, and even into some early adulthood, until you learn those critical thinking skills and you start to learn how to question and kind of diversify your thinking.
Well, it takes courage. Part of that maturity is being brave enough to differ with people who are going to call you an a-hole if you say something that sounds like it's on the fringe or sounds like it might be a conspiracy theory. That's what YouTube is doing when they censor people who speculate about potential theories. When they shut them down, they're trying to intimidate them and embarrass them to get them to shut up and get their viewpoints out of the popular discourse.
And I'm really starting to hate the term conspiracy theory, because you look back over time and it's like, what happened to like just plain old philosophy or people that had theories?
Yeah.
Like, these people that we look back in history that we consider to be like absolute geniuses.
Yeah.
At the time, people thought they were absolutely mad. But you fast forward and you realize
they turn out to be right.
You realize just how influential and what an impact they make down, in future generations and everything like that, and how right they are.
Well, even if it's just a year later. I mean, a year ago, the frontline doctors were standing on the steps of the Supreme Court bemoaning the fact that hydroxychloroquine had been essentially banned by big global organizations that are supposed to be concerning themselves with the health of the people. Turns out they were right. Okay, a year later, now the media is saying, well, I guess hydroxychloroquine really works and it can actually stop COVID and make people well.
Yeah.
Where in the hell was this media a year ago or a year and a half ago? Unbelievable stuff.
Right.
I do have one more pick your poison for you.
Okay.
And this is the icing on the cake.
Okay.
This is the bonus pick your poison. Jasmine Star, would you rather never see again hurricanes or Anthony Fauci?
Anthony Fauci.
Hurricanes for the win.
I'm sorry. You want to know my rationale here?
Well, because he's responsible for a lot more deaths of Americans than hurricanes are. That's probably your rationale, right?
Yeah, you can prepare for a hurricane. You can have a kit ready for a hurricane.
Yeah, but you can't have a kit ready for the next
You can't, yeah.
widespread virus manipulation of the month. So,
On that chipper note, let's move on to Waco, Texas.
All right, we're going to begin with some facts about our TLA of the episode.
All right.
A TLA is a 3-letter agency, and as you know, the federal government is loaded with 3-letter agencies, and so is your local state government as well. But the ATF is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, colloquially known as the ATF, which I assume stands for Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. The ATF employs some 2,700 special agents, 817 industry investigators, 1,600 administrators. This includes 250 explosives specialists, 110 fire investigators, 85 laboratory personnel, 35 canine handlers, and 20 explosive enforcement officers. Interesting fact about the ATF, they sometimes seize property during their investigations, and sometimes they end up with stuff that they don't know who it belongs to. So I read this on their website. Whenever they get guns or ammo or grenades or stuff that's legal on the street, I guess grenades aren't, but stuff that's legal on the street and they don't know who it belongs to, they post it on the website as unclaimed property, along with their estimated value. So my thought is, how much fun would it be to call the ATF and say, yeah, I think that's mine.
I would not recommend that.
Do you think that's a little bit of a honeypot?
Yeah, I would not recommend doing that.
Some of the items currently available at the Miami field office of the ATF include 284 rounds assorted ammunition, 3 high-capacity magazines, but it doesn't say what for. Quote, unknown pistol. If the ATF doesn't know what the pistol is, that's an issue, right? A Sig Sauer SP 2022 pistol, and a black silencer. That's what's available right now, unclaimed, in the Miami ATF.
Well, my guess is that if you go to claim any of those, that you are more than likely involved in criminal activity, and they know they are baiting you into picking up your property in order
indeed.
to.
So the ATF has a mission statement. Their official mission statement is on their website, and the very first words in their mission statement are, ATF protects the public from crimes involving firearms, explosives, arson. And we're going to talk about an event during which they failed to accomplish their mission on all 3 counts. Firearms, explosives, and arson, it would appear. But before we get started, you found a video from an former ATF employee who was involved in the Waco tragedy by the name of Mary Daugherty. And she's going to talk a little bit about some of the children who ended up dying, who were removed from the Waco compound and returned to the Waco compound by ATF employees. Her name is Mary Daugherty, and this is going to kick off our discussion of the Waco, Texas massacre. And here's that video for you.
Anything to do with us. She was more like a bodyguard, I could tell. However, the other woman brought the 2 kids to us, and there was a 7-year-old boy, and then there was a younger boy that I could tell he had some physical deficiencies, and Curtis took care of him, and I took care of the 7-year-old, drove him back to the compound. We got out of there safely and learned a lot about what had happened inside. And at that time, I had learned that David Koresh was only letting the children out that didn't belong to him. They didn't have a choice. You know, the adults did, but the children didn't. All of us were a little upset when the FBI came in, not because it was the FBI, it's just we felt we had a mission and we needed to complete it. It was the best idea because we were very emotionally, drained, whether we realized it at the time or not. And in fact, there was an agent from another agency that said, "Why did y'all have your hands up in the air?" And I said, because the majority of us believed that they were going to shoot us from behind. And we knew the media was out there. And so we said, if they shoot us from behind, we want the world to see that. You go out places, like I'd still continue to do my cases, and I'd gone to one FFL, and a customer had learned that I was ATF and started calling me a baby killer. FFL, thank goodness, kicked him out of his shop. But it's those kinds of things that you got, and it was just jackbooted thug, baby killer, and I'm like, you just don't know everything. Yet we did what we had to do, and there was a lot more behind it. We didn't get to talk to anybody about it, and that's the only reason I've agreed to do this today.
So that's Mary Daugherty, who has since retired from her position with the ATF. And what's the sense that you get from that video, Jazmine? Like, what are your takeaways from that?
Well, first of all, it's just sad.
Clearly.
Yeah. And I really admire her bravery and in that statement that she says and is admitting that there was a lot to learn in looking back that could have been done differently, and that the personal attacks that she had towards her being an ATF agent And here I watched the full interview, and she was a support staff that was there strictly to go in to help extract the children. Here, she was like saying, you don't know, as she's being personally attacked, you're a baby killer, You don't know the full story. There's more to the story.
And it doesn't sound like she's able to
tell
the full story.
She can't come out and say what the full story is, but she's like, if people only knew what the full story was, it would make a little bit more sense, that, and it's like kind of that, and that's why I'm here. And then it says, like right at the end there, that she's like, after she retired, she has dedicated the rest of her, her professional career to helping avoid these kind of things from happening in other agencies and stuff like that.
And so speaking of that full story, what we're going to do today is attempt to put some more light on a fuller version of the story about the worst civilian massacre by government agents in the history of the United States, the Waco, Texas massacre. Now, the government, the ATF, all the mainstream media refer to it as the Waco siege. Mm-hmm. It did last for a couple of months. If you want to kind of maybe step through the chronology with me, I'll tell you what I knew, and you tell me if I'm wrong or not. But in February of 1993, the ATF was attempting to serve a search warrant to Mount Carmel, which was a compound of religious believers near Waco, Texas. These religious believers were led by a fellow named David Koresh, that was an assumed name. And there was certainly some questionable activity going on in terms of the leadership that he provided and the kind of beliefs that they were instructed in. I don't know the extent to which any of that was actually illegal, however.
Right.
And so after this initial attempt to serve a warrant, there was a firefight that occurred between members of the ATF and members of the Branch Davidians, which is the name of the religious sect.
I want to interject just real quick there. According to the interview, at the 25th anniversary by an ATF agent, where they were giving their personal accounts, where I know that there was some question about the validity of the search warrant. That's been a source of some controversy.
In other words, the warrant may not have been for legitimate grievances.
If they really had enough, substantial evidence to go in with it. What they had done was they had an associate ATF agent that was able to essentially become an associate within the cult. For a period of time, he didn't have full access to the building, but enough access where he saw enough.
So he was undercover.
Right.
He was an ATF guy who was undercover.
Right. So he was able to see enough to gather enough evidence where they were able to get an active warrant.
Okay. Could he have been conceivably involved in setting up some of that evidence too? Because I know a lot of stakeouts end up as framing. A certain percentage of stakeout activities are actually just framing activities.
Considering the amount of weaponry that they had there, I don't believe that to be accurate.
Okay. Well, the ATF claims a lot of weapons, and it's clear based on the fatalities of the ATF officers and agents that they did have substantial amount of at least, guns, pistols and rifles.
Right. And the amount of munitions, the number of pounds of gunpowder and everything.
Which none of that is illegal, and that's part of the issue that I think a lot of people have. It's not illegal to possess gunpowder. It's not illegal to possess rifles. It's not illegal to possess pistols. I mean, there are certain kinds of guns that they've made illegal, that they've decreed illegal, fully automatic machine guns and stuff. But if they were looking for that kind of stuff there, the ATF has claimed post-mortem that what they discovered were the means to create such. In other words, they didn't have a bunch of Tommy guns and, Mac 10s and fully automatic guns. Like, they didn't have that.
Right.
They had the means to produce.
And there was some concerns that there was some exploitation of children that was going on as well.
Right. And also some polygamy, perhaps. David Koresh was definitely an unsavory character.
Yeah.
But the question is, did he and his followers and the children at his facility, I'm smiling because of the dogs in the background, not because of the subject matter. Did those children deserve to die? And would it not have made sense for them to go after David Koresh on the grounds of those misappropriations as opposed to these weapons? In other words, why was it the ATF? Why wasn't it Child Protective Services or the FBI investigating these? And that's what kind of makes me wonder whether or not that stuff was really going on.
Okay, well, the FBI was involved.
Here we go. The ATF doesn't like to talk about the FBI. And the FBI doesn't want to even admit that they were there. So
but there's a ton of it. This is where we branch off, okay? The initial raid was the ATF. Without a doubt. We're not going to dispute that. But the FBI was definitely involved.
Okay.
And they are the ones that, if we go into the CBS Austin article.
Okay, and this is an article about the incident. I'm going to pull it up on the computer here. Okay. All right. This was written 25 years after the standoff.
So this article takes you through the timeline, essentially. And it also talks about several different points, and it clearly is where the orders were given.
Which orders would those be?
All right, so the initial raid that happened with the shootout involved the ATF and the Branch Davidians. Then when we all think of Waco and we think of the actual the massive fire at the compound, that was all done and carried out by the FBI.
But the FBI doesn't admit that.
Yes, they do.
The FBI admits that they carried out a fire at the compound? I didn't think that was the case. I thought the mainstream reports that the FBI claimed that the people blew themselves up.
Their story is that they poured lantern, like gas and fluid, around the compound and set themselves on fire.
In other words, when you say they,
the Branch Davidians.
The FBI claims that the Branch Davidians did it to themselves.
Right.
Okay. Understood.
However, there's a bunch of conflicting. This is where we get into our story.
I mean, look at that. Look at the explosion fireball. I mean, that does not look like lantern oil to me.
That's a big lantern.
I mean, that fireball is 15 stories tall, probably. So we're looking at the fireball on the screen for those listening on the podcast.
Yeah.
We are looking at the YouTube video has a picture of the fireball. So go ahead.
So, essentially what had happened was, President Clinton was debriefed by the Janet Reno, the Attorney General at the time, on the incident that was going on the morning.
Starting with the shootout. That's how it all started, right?
He was already aware of that, but of what the FBI's possible actions were going to be in the morning.
To get these people to surrender.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that the plan was to go in with using CS2.
Which is what?
There's different types of tear gas, but they were going to be using CS2.
Okay.
Her quote is obviously, she said, "If I had thought that the chances were great for mass suicide, I would never have approved the plan." She personally approved the assault in hopes of forcing a peaceful ending to the standoff.
Meaning authorizing the assault, meaning authorizing the use of tear gas to assault the compound.
As a peaceful ending to the standoff. Now, they took tanks and ran them into the side of the compound, tearing the walls apart, and shot in 400 farats of CS2 gas.
The FBI did this.
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily understand the thinking, how this is considered a peaceful ending to the standoff. That's just what I think. I mean,
well, it's not,
but I'm
because
not.
there was some really terrible byproducts of their choice of gas. Which, but let's take it a step back real quick, because Janet Reno, the Attorney General, said something that you just quoted, which she said if she had believed that there had been a risk of mass suicide,
right,
or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But Koresh had spoken to media outlets on television, mainstream media outlets, and had been interviewed multiple times and stated over and over during the standoff. Mm-hmm. That they had no intention of suicide, and that they were not going. That's not what they were about. They weren't going to do that.
Right. However, what then she says, she said she never considered chances were great for mass suicide, despite Koresh's warning in a letter just that week, that any agents trying to harm him would be devoured by fire. So she's trying to then say, oh, but he was threatening them that they would be devoured by fire.
Well, it sounds like they took his prophecy and tried to figure out a way to make it look like that it was them that did it, right? Right. Try to frame them for mass arson. Or try to frame the Branch Davidians for a big-time arson.
So Clinton says yes, gives the order for Reno. It's okay for her to authorize give the approval for the attack for the plan. That then is handed down to FBI agent Ricks, who also said authorities believe that tear gassing was the best way to avert a possible mass suicide, because it would cause confusion inside the compound.
Okay.
So
this was from an FBI.
Right. So
I'm with that rationale.
So here he's saying. So here he said. He says he felt it's the best way to avert a possible mass suicide, but yet it conflicts her statement of saying, "Well, if I never thought that there could possibly be there was a possibility of a mass suicide."
Well, that actually
it
makes sense with the political landscape, because back then the FBI was very critical of the Department of Justice, even though it was contained by it. The FBI wanted more autonomy. They wanted to be a law enforcement agency and not a part of the justice, the court system, which is what the DOJ is. It's a bunch of lawyers. So if they weren't getting along, if the FBI special agent in charge was not getting along with Janet Reno, that's not like a super huge surprise.
Right.
But it sounds like the ATF was also incredibly resentful of the fact that the FBI was even there to begin with. So what do you have on those ingredients about the tear gas? Because there's some characteristics of that tear gas that was selected by the FBI for use in this case that are really damning for them.
That is correct. If you go under the article Lethal Weapon, FBI's use of tear gas, question in the Davidian trial article.
Okay, I've got that pulled up.
All right. This is our source here. This is actually taken, it's back in 2000 from the trial.
This is from the Austin Chronicle.
Yeah.
Written by Robert Bryce, July 7th, 2000.
And there's a lot that you can find online about the actual compounds. So I'm just going to break it down just a little bit. The chemical that agents sprayed into the compound is called CS2, a fine powder that stings the skin, eyes, nose, and throat, according to Doug Koger, a chemical specialist with the U.S. Army Material Command in Alexandria, Virginia. CS2 is delivered through a tube by tanks of compressed air, which does not involve any flame or explosive, Koger said. Now, I just want to break down that statement there and just say, okay, that could be fact that, yeah, essentially speaking, in a large open area, and I'll get down into that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But when you put compressed air, and this is just logic, okay, compressed air with any kind of volatile chemicals.
In terms of flammability.
Right.
Yep. Volatile in terms of catching on fire.
Right. Into a small area, such as any kind of a building, room, you're going to run the risk of having a fire.
So not only are these things potential fire starters, but also in your research, you found out that just a short time before this incident, the Geneva Conventions had made the use of tear gas illegal during times of war or during warlike conditions.
On January 13th, 1993, the United States and dozens of other countries signed the Chemical Weapons Convention, the most far-reaching treaty regarding prohibitions of the use of chemical weapons. The treaty bans the use of nerve agents, mustard gas, and other compounds, including tear gas, during wartime. 3 months and 6 days after the U.S. signed the convention, the FBI used CS2 on the Branch Davidians.
So if you're the FBI and you're saying that these guys are a domestic enemy, the use of tear gas has to be taken off the table because it's illegal by the Geneva Convention. You cannot use it in an act of war because that's a war crime. If your argument is that these guys are at war with the United States or they're trying to commit insurrection or treason.
If we wanted to counter-argue and just go and play devil's advocate with them and just say, just to try to prove their point, no, they weren't, that they were within their rights of being in use of rioting. As in riot.
Riot gear. So local law enforcement.
Okay.
The problem is the ATF and the FBI are not local law enforcement.
But here's where I'm going to circle back here with that. Okay. Despite its potential drawbacks, CS has many advantages that the U.S. Army wanted. And in 1959, it adopted CS as its standard riot control agent. But the Army has long been aware of its potential deadliness, particularly when used in enclosed spaces. One 1985 manual warns that CS, in quotes, is not to be used in buildings, near hospitals, or in areas where lingering contamination could cause problems.
Interesting.
And if you could just look up, please, while I'm reading this part in that article, how much was put into the building.
Sure, keep going.
In 1995, the Los Angeles Times quoted a spokesman for the Federal Laboratories, a company which makes CS gas, who explained that CS is designed for use in a large open area. If you were to shoot too much in a building or enclosed area, you could suffocate individuals. There's another part in this article as well where, and perhaps the most important, federal authorities have always contended that Koresh and the Davidians set themselves aflame, and that they were all to blame for the fiasco in Waco rests on them.
So to answer your question,
okay, go ahead.
There is information in the Austin Chronicle article about the amount of CS tear gas that was used at Mount Carmel, at the Branch Davidian compound. It says the first dose of tear gas was shot into Mount Carmel at about 6 a.m. by a Patton tank filled with a huge boom and outfitted with spray canisters containing a quart of tear gas each. It doesn't say how many, though. Well, it does. During that first assault, the tank inserted 6 canisters, roughly 1.5 gallons of the gas. Quote, I saw people in the chapel who had short sleeves on trying to rub it off. They were crying, Doyle testified. It was like battery acid on their skin. After the first tank assault came the ferret rounds. FBI agents riding inside Bradley fighting vehicles began. How does the FBI get Bradleys? Okay, so the Army was involved here too, then, is what we're saying. The FBI doesn't have Bradleys. The FBI doesn't have tanks. So the Army was there. This is definitely implied that the Army was a part of this operation. 40 millimeter ferret rounds containing CS tear gas into every available window at Mount Carmel. CS gas gets its name from the 2 American scientists who invented it, B.B. Corson and R.W. Stoughton. The agents used Army-issued grenade launchers to fire the projectiles, each of which contained 3.7 grams of CS gas dissolved in 33 grams of the solvent methylene chloride.
Okay, I want to stop right there with that methylene chloride, okay? Because that methylene chloride is going to be a biggie here. And where I was going with, federal authorities have always contended that Koresh and the Davidians set themselves aflame, and that all the blame for the fiasco in Waco rests on them, not the government. But Eric R. Lawson, a PhD chemist who has studied fire suppression and inhalable anesthetics for 3 decades, said there's plenty of evidence to suggest that CS gas contributed to the fire. Larson, who was in the courtroom, was not allowed to take the witness stand, says that methylene chloride, the dispersing agent used by the FBI with the CS gas, was deadly by itself. Larson, who volunteered to testify, submitted a sworn statement to the court that was not seen by the 5 members of the jury. In it, he says that CS dust would pose the risk of a flash fire, and that the methylene chloride is a very potent, fast-acting inhalation general anesthesia agent, nearly on par with halothane, the most potent agent currently used in surgical anesthesia.
So when they shot these projectiles into the building, they were not only tear gassing them, but they were also anesthetizing them through respiration. They were putting them to sleep through them breathing these particles into their respiratory systems.
Well, if you wanted to
And
Again,
that was at 7:30 a.m. that happened.
Again, if you want to play devil's advocate and you wanted to say, okay, we're gonna shoot it and we're gonna neutralize the target,
So
okay,
their idea
this
then
is
is they
here's
put
where
them to sleep and then they go in and wake and
and
arrest
then-
everybody.
and then we're going to take him out safely. Then what a messed up plan that was, because as soon as you start gunfire, guess what?
Fluebird.
Boom.
Yeah, they fluebirded.
You just have a massive explosion, and there you go. The FBI just blew up Waco.
All right, and so the methylene chloride combined with the pressurized air. Now, I get the pressurized air was used to propel, and that was an hour before. So at 7:30 a.m., methylene chloride goes into the complex. 375 ferret rounds penetrated the complex. And those also contain tear gas. So they're emitting tear gas, and still they're putting these people to sleep with the methylene chloride. And then at 9 a.m., it says another assault came with the tanks inserting another 4 bottles of the tear gas. By that time, the levels of tear gas inside the building were reaching extremely high levels. Thank you, journalist who wrote that redundant sentence. A 1995 report prepared by Failure Analysis Associates for the National Rifle Association estimated that when the third assault ended, CS concentrations inside the building ranged from 30 to 90 times that required to deter trained soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
The report also found that levels of methylene chloride
Toxic.
were reaching levels nearly 2 times those considered, quote, immediately dangerous to life and health. So these people, not only were they knocked out and tear gassed, which that's a nerve agent.
Mm-hmm.
So they're knocked out. They probably had nervous system effects of damage, perhaps long term. But then they also use so much of this knockout chemical that they could have been causing permanent problems, immediately dangerous to life. And this is in the Failure Analysis Associates for the NRA, which did a report on this. But that's not the end of it. They attacked again. The FBI attacked again at 11:45 a.m. when a tank inserted 4 canisters of tear gas. According to the Failure Analysis report, in the minutes before the first fire was spotted at Mount Carmel, CS concentrations ranged from 5 to 60 times the level needed to deter soldiers. Methylene chloride levels still exceeded IDLH standards. So by the time the compound was on fire, this report estimates that the FBI had inserted about 7 gallons of tear gas weighing more than 77 pounds.
Imagine that. 7 gallons.
Of dissipated tear gas. Dissipated.
Okay. Now, I just want to say, all right, you don't even, at that point, you don't even need, compressed air, all right? Operating room, surgical site, fires, all right? Or any kind of fire for that matter.
They say that
You need oxygen, a gas source, and a heat source.
Yeah.
And
or
this
a spark
had
of some kind.
a heat source. You have gunfire.
Any shell hitting the ground is a spark. Right?
Think how hot brass is.
Right.
When you fire a firearm, even just the brass itself.
Yeah, it's hot for a split second. Yep.
That little bit of spark, any of that,
So
it was enough to just make it go and explode.
So the last gas attack was at 11:45.
So
now they have been gassing them since 6 a.m. repeatedly. So from 6 until 11:45, which is how many hours? Almost 6 hours. They've been gassing and methylene chloride over and over. So it's at this point nobody's functional inside the building. They've knocked them all out. They've tear gassed them, and they've made the place a tinderbox ready to blow. And then exactly what happens? They claim at 12:07. So some 22 minutes after the fourth assault, the building catches fire. 22 minutes after the fact.
of course, they didn't go in or were able to go in because of the flames until hours later Well, I wouldn't get near that freaking place either.
Hell no. Now, here's the thing. Do you honestly think, because they claim the official narrative on the ATF's website, which I read earlier today, is that the standoff ended when the Branch Davidians set their own complex on fire, despite claims that they were not suicidal, despite public appearances that they were not suicidal and that's not how they were going to go down, despite the fact that all of these incendiary devices, kind of disguised incendiary devices, were in use by the FBI, whom the ATF didn't want there, using equipment that the FBI didn't normally have access to unless they were working with the military. And so now at 12:07, hours after all of them were already knocked out, asleep, and perhaps dead, now a fire breaks out? So the conspiracy theory that we're testing in all of this observation tonight is that the fire that burned down Mount Carmel was set by the government or the government's agencies and not by the residents of the compound. That's what we're looking at.
Yep.
What else do you have? Do you have any more fuel for the fire?
I think there was enough fuel in this fire.
I think there's enough fuel in this fire to do it about 55 more times. So it probably makes sense to go over some of the media coverage as well, because the media...
Do you have were you able to get that article or I mean the
Which article is that, Jazmine?
I mean, not the article, but were you able to grab that?
You mean the one we talked about before the show that we were going to prepare for and have ready to go?
With the...
Let's take a look here. Maybe we do. That's that one. That's that one. There's a picture of Waco, right? There's that. Nope, it's not ready. So what does it contain, the one you're referring to?
The lady reporter that made usage of the term the 2-year-old cult member was involved or was one of the victims in the initial attack, was one that had been amongst the killed. And it was really sad to hear how the media was already using the term 2-year-old cult member. It's a 2-year-old child. I mean, what 2-year-old has already made a choice, let alone has the mental capacity to decide what they're even involved in? They're an innocent. Mm-hmm. And to put that kind of spin on media coverage, to desensitize the public, to make it seem like it's okay that a 2-year-old child was shot and killed.
Or to just defend the establishment. Okay, the ATF and the FBI got together with somebody and just blew up 80 people, approximately 20 of whom were children. And now the news that night refers to a 2-year-old who lost her life as a cult member. I mean, it's just unbelievably callous. The report is out there. We don't have it handy because I neglected some of my preparation today. But the good news is the green screen is working. The laptop hasn't crashed yet. The live chat's working. And we haven't gotten this. The episode hasn't been banned yet, although we did get in a little bit of trouble apparently with Twitter for trying to run that Joe Biden video. So, I mean, this story stinks. There's nothing good about the story of Waco, Texas.
No.
And I hate that this town, whenever I hear Waco, Texas, I just think of what happened with the Branch Davidians and their facility getting blown up and exploded, and all of the nastiness of the. So whenever you hear the term Waco, Texas, imagine if this happened in Akron, Ohio, or name a town from where you're from.
Indianapolis.
There you go. If this had happened in Indy, like that, Indianapolis is a big town though. Like nobody's ever heard of Waco. Sorry, Waco people. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's this.
That was the other interesting point, though. Remember with some of the coverage that we were watching in the interview, and people in the town
had never heard of the Branch Davidians,
right?
Yeah.
They were like the woman who had lived there for 35 years, and they were like, you know, have you ever heard of it? And she was like, no, I've lived here for 35 years, and I've never heard of them. And it's like
it was some farm like ranch. 9 miles out of Waco.
So it didn't seem like they really had. Were they doing things there that were illegal?
Maybe.
Probably. Yeah, probably. Mm-hmm. You know, was there a chance that there were children that possibly were being exploited? Possibly so. Yeah. I mean, that's a real thing.
And women as well. I mean, it was definitely there was polygamy going on for sure.
Was David Koresh more than likely mentally ill? I would say that's a very strong absolute probability there.
Let me just posit one thing. Is it possible that narcissism is a mental illness?
Absolutely.
Does that mean that everybody suffers from it? Or does that mean that there are certain cases that classify as illness and other cases that are just like narcissistic experiences or
Well,
phases?
I think you have narcissistic personalities, but then you have a true class of like narcissistic sociopaths. And that's where it becomes very dangerous.
So he's up there with Ted Bundy and Barack Obama and people like that. Wait, what? George W. Bush? Anybody? Bueller?
Wow.
You
are trying to get this episode banned.
I'm not trying to. I don't want to.
No, we want to stay on. We don't want to get totally banned here.
We do. It is just about time to wrap up the show.
We're getting in trouble.
We want to stay out of trouble, though.
Right.
But first, we have to give a thumbs up, thumbs down on whether or not the conspiracy theory that the government was responsible, or the government's agents were responsible for the fire that destroyed the compound at Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas. I'm going to go on the record first and say that I think this is a plausible theory. I think the evidence more than supports the idea that the FBI or the ATF or the Army or somebody set that fire. And I think the evidence is pretty convincing that the people inside the compound could not have done so because they would have already been asleep or dead. What do you think?
I am going to go with a thumbs up that it's a plausible theory. I'm going with the ATF involved in the initial raid and essentially was pushed aside and by the upper powers that be handed down to the FBI. And the FBI was given the order to shoot in the CS2, thus anesthetizing and creating a fireball and blowing up the building. So that's my plausibility there and giving my thumbs up there.
So, Trouble in Paradise, this is our podcast that we do every 2 weeks. You can catch us live streaming on every other Sunday evening. So we will be coming back at you on, let's see, what's 13 plus 14? Come on, Jasmine Star.
27.
Is that? Yeah. All right, so we'll see you on June 27th.
I'm at like Rain Man.
Yes, you are. Definitely Judge Wapner.
Definitely.
So why don't you let
with
them
my
know how
invisibility bracelet?
Oh yeah, Jasmine Star now has an actual invisibility bracelet, which she is wearing. That's how you know how well it works.
the cloak of invisibility.
Yep. So she is the bearer of the ring of power around her wrist.
Yes.
If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can reach me at NigelKent239 on Twitter and at Trouble239 on Instagram. Jazmine, how else can everybody get a hold of us and our wonderful, wonderful podcast here from Paradise?
You can reach us here, obviously, on our YouTube channel, Trouble in Paradise. Hit that like and subscribe button so you can receive notifications when we go live. Instagram, Trouble239, Twitter at Tipcast239, email trouble@trouble239.com, Patreon, Trouble239, audio versions on all major podcasters available. If you want to reach me, I'm at star_light_readings, or just look up Jazmine Star on
So star
Instagram.
with 2 R's,
Yes.
_light_readings.
Thank you.
On Instagram?
On Instagram, yes. But if you just look up Jazmine Star with 2 R's, you should be able to find my page on Instagram, as well as at Jazmine, Jazmine, STARR 239 on Twitter.
Awesome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we really could use your support. If you're on a podcatcher, if you're on iTunes, give us a review. Please make sure it's a 5-star review. Those are our favorite kind. Because we're here to try to pull the lid off some of this crap that's going on. We're trying not to cuss tonight. I think I've done a remarkably good job of not dropping any S-bombs or F-bombs.
Did I drop any?
I don't know. We're going to have to go back and check it out. But we actually are we're considering broadcasting the program over the air. So if we do that, we still have the FCC to contend with. That's your TLA for another episode. But thank you for joining us this evening, and we will do what we always do in case of a hurricane, which is to stay out of trouble. And Jazmine, sign us off.
How do we turn this thing off?
The Trouble in Paradise podcast is intended for mature audiences. This means you will hear realistic adult language such as and go off. Audience discretion is advised.